Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. I never expected the night to take such a turn. It was a quiet Thursday evening when I heard the familiar chime of my doorbell. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I peeked through the peephole, I saw James standing there, a bottle of wine in one hand and a hesitant smile on his face. James had been my neighbor for 3 years. We weren't particularly close, but we'd always exchanged pleasantries and the occasional chat over our shared fence. A former professor in his late 50s, he had that calm, thoughtful demeanor that made him easy to talk to. His salt and pepper hair and always neatly pressed shirts gave him an air of quiet dignity. I opened the door, surprised. "James, everything okay?" "I hope I'm not intruding," he said, holding up the bottle. "I realized I never properly thanked you for watching over my place when I was away last month. Thought I'd make it up to you with a home-cooked meal. If you're up for it?" I hesitated for only a second before nodding. I hadn't made any dinner plans, and truth be told, the idea of company was unexpectedly nice. "Let me grab my sweater," I said. His home just next door had always intrigued me. It was larger than mine, built in the same classic style, but with a distinct personal touch, dark wooden bookshelves filled with old novels, a grand piano tucked in the corner, and walls adorned with paintings that suggested a love for art. The air carried a subtle blend of rosemary and something rich and buttery. "I hope you like lamb," he said. "Pour in 2 glasses of wine." I smiled. "I love it." As we settled at the dining table, the soft glow of a single candle between us, the atmosphere felt different. Intimate, but not in an uncomfortable way. Just warm. We spoke about everything and nothing. His years teaching literature, my work as a freelance editor, the changing seasons. But there was something in James' expression, a flicker of hesitation, like he was holding something back. And then, just as we finished our meal, he set his glass down and sighed. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you," he said, his voice unusually measured. I raised an eyebrow. "Sounds serious." He nodded. "It is." The weight in his tone made my heart skip. What could he possibly have to say that carried such gravity? James leaned slightly forward, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass. "I never expected to move here. 3 years ago, I packed up my life and left a city I had lived in for over 30 years. I told people it was for a change of pace, for retirement, but that was only half the truth. I stayed silent, letting him speak. The truth is, I came here looking for someone." My breath hitched slightly. The way he said it, it felt personal, like it involved me somehow. "James," I started, but he shook his head gently. "You remind me of her," he admitted, his gaze searching mine. "Someone I knew a long time ago. Someone I lost." A strange feeling settled in my chest. "She was the love of my life," he continued, voice softer now. "And when I saw you for the first time, I swear for a moment I thought I was looking at her again." I exhaled slowly, my mind racing. "I know it sounds strange," he added quickly. "I'm not saying this to make you uncomfortable. He paused, then chuckled ruefully. "I guess I just needed to tell you." Silence settled between us, not awkward, but heavy. I didn't know what to say. Finally, I asked, "What happened to her?" James looked away for a moment before meeting my gaze again. "She chose someone else." A deep sadness flickered across his face. Not bitterness, just something quiet and resigned. I felt an odd ache for this man who had lived a whole life before I ever met him, carrying a story I never knew existed. "Do I really remind you of her?" I finally asked. He nodded. "More than you know." A shiver ran down my spine, not of fear, but of something else. Something unspoken. I took a sip of my wine, my mind swirling with questions I wasn't sure I was ready to ask. And that was when the night truly began. I couldn't stop thinking about what James had confessed. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept replaying his words, the weight of his confession hanging in the air like a thick fog. I kept thinking about the way he looked at me, the way his eyes softened with a mixture of longing and sorrow when he spoke of her. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us, something I wasn't prepared for. The next morning, I kept myself busy. I told myself I was just overthinking things, that it was a passing moment, a neighborly chat over dinner, nothing more. But in the quiet moments of my day, when I was alone with my thoughts, I couldn't escape that nagging feeling. I didn't know if it was his words or the strange connection I felt when he spoke of the woman he had loved, but something in me resonated with his story. It was mid-afternoon when my doorbell rang again. I wasn't expecting anyone this time, but when I opened it, I found James standing there with his usual hesitant smile, though this time there was a new energy about him. "I brought you some flowers," he said, holding out a small bouquet of bright sunflowers. I blinked in surprise. "James, you didn't have to." "It's nothing," he said, stepping inside before I could protest. "I just thought it might brighten your day." I felt a flush rise to my cheeks. No one had ever really brought me flowers just because, and certainly not in such an unassuming way. The gesture felt intimate in its simplicity, a quiet acknowledgement that left me strangely touched. "Thank you," I said, accepting the flowers. "They're beautiful." "Glad you like them," he replied, glancing around as if searching for something to say. "I hope you're not still thinking about last night." I know it was a lot to take in. I hadn't realized it until he said it, but my thoughts had been consumed by him ever since the dinner. I took a breath, trying to steady myself before responding. I didn't expect it, that's all," I admitted. "It's a lot to process." James nodded slowly, his gaze softening. "I understand. And I never meant to make you uncomfortable. I just thought, I thought you should know the truth. Sometimes when we find something we never thought we'd have, it stirs up emotions we've long buried." There was a vulnerability in his words that caught me off guard. James wasn't the type to wear his heart on his sleeve. He was private, reserved even, and yet here he was, sharing a piece of himself I hadn't expected. "I don't know what to say," I said honestly. "You don't have to say anything," he replied, his voice gentle. "I'm not expecting anything from you. But I thought maybe you might want to understand." I was quiet for a long moment, feeling the weight of his words settle inside me. There was something about him, a tenderness that had been hiding beneath the surface, something I hadn't seen before. He wasn't just my neighbor. He was a man with a past, a story, and emotions that ran deep. "I think I understand more than you realize," I said, my voice quieter now. "It's just unexpected, you know." James smiled softly. "Life often is." There was a pause, then, almost hesitantly, he asked, "Can I be honest with you about something else?" I looked at him, a little surprised by the question. "Of course." "I know this may sound crazy," he began, looking down at his hands for a moment before meeting my gaze again. "But I feel like I've known you for much longer than I actually have. Like there's a connection between us, something I can't quite explain." The words hung in the air, and I felt a small flutter in my chest. I wasn't sure if it was the sincerity in his voice or the unspoken weight behind his confession, but I couldn't deny that a part of me felt it too. "It's not crazy," I said softly. "I've been feeling it too. A connection. I can't explain it either." He smiled, though there was a hint of uncertainty in his eyes. "I didn't want to overstep. I know this isn't the kind of thing that can just happen, but I don't know. Something about you reminds me of her, and it's hard not to notice." I didn't know what to say. I felt an odd mix of emotions: gratitude, curiosity, and a little bit of fear. I had spent so many years learning to live on my own, learning to find my own peace, that the idea of opening up to someone again, especially someone I barely knew, felt both exciting and terrifying. But as I stood there in my living room, the sun filtering through the windows and casting a warm glow over us, I realized something. I wasn't as afraid as I thought I'd be. "I don't know where this will go," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil swirling inside. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't need to have all the answers right now." James nodded slowly, a deep sense of relief washing over him. "I think you're right." We stood in silence for a moment, both of us lost in our own thoughts. There was a quiet understanding between us, a shared moment of connection that felt almost sacred in its simplicity. "Would you like to sit down?" I asked finally, gesturing to the couch. "We could talk more if you want." James smiled again, this time with a warmth that felt like the beginning of something new. "I'd like that," he said softly. As we sat down together, the air between us felt different, charged with the promise of something unspoken, a bond being formed in real time. What had started as a simple dinner between neighbors was slowly blossoming into something more, something I couldn't yet define, but that I was beginning to want to explore. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone as I'd once believed. The days after James' confession were filled with a strange sense of anticipation. The quiet, ordinary moments of my life now seemed charged with something unspoken, like a melody I could almost hear but couldn't quite place. I'd find myself glancing out the window, wondering if he would drop by again, if he'd have something more to share, or if perhaps we would simply continue down this unexpected path we had begun together. I tried not to think about it too much. After all, this was new territory. But I couldn't help it. There was something about him, something deep in his eyes when he looked at me, that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in years. It was as if, for the first time in a long time, I didn't have to hide parts of myself away, to pretend to be someone I wasn't. With James, I felt like I could breathe a little easier. The weekend arrived, and though I didn't plan on it, I found myself standing at my front door again, this time holding a plate of freshly baked cookies. I had made them as a kind of thank you for the flowers he had brought me, but as soon as the thought crossed my mind, I realized I might be seeking his company just as much as I was offering the cookies. I was nervous. It wasn't like me to act on impulse, especially not with someone I barely knew. But something about the way he had opened up to me, the quiet vulnerability he had shown, made me feel like maybe I wasn't the only one navigating this strange space between us. When I knocked on his door, it only took a few seconds before I heard his familiar footsteps. The door opened slowly, and there he was, his smile warm, but with a hint of surprise. "Well, hello there," he said, eyes flicking down to the plate in my hands. "What's this?" "Just a little something," I said, offering him the plate. "For the flowers. And well, for the conversation the other night. I thought it might be nice to share some cookies." His eyes softened, and he took the plate from my hands. "Thank you," he said, his voice sincere. Come in. I stepped inside, the familiar scent of rosemary and something rich wafting in the air. It was always warm and inviting in James' home, with its deep wooden bookshelves and the low hum of classical music playing softly in the background. The same comforting atmosphere that I had grown used to, but now it felt different. More intimate. "Can I get you something to drink?" he asked, already moving toward the kitchen. I followed him, feeling a little nervous. "I'll just have some water, thanks." As he poured the water, I took a moment to glance around his kitchen. It was cozy and lived in, like the rest of his house. There were little touches everywhere. An old wooden spice rack, a small collection of recipe books that seemed well loved, a collection of mismatched mugs stacked near the counter. "I've been thinking about what you said," James said suddenly, his voice quieter than usual. He placed the glass of water in front of me, his fingers brushing mine just lightly, but enough to send a jolt of warmth up my arm. About how life is unpredictable, and how connections just happen. I took a sip of water, my heart pounding in my chest. "And what have you been thinking?" "I've been thinking about us," he admitted, his eyes searching mine for any sign of hesitation. "I know this is all very sudden, but I can't shake the feeling that we're connected in a way that goes beyond what we've shared so far. I know you didn't expect it, and I didn't either. But there's something here, something real." My heart skipped a beat, and I suddenly felt the weight of his words. The way he said it, so genuine, so full of conviction. It made me want to believe it too. I didn't know where this was going, or if I was even ready for it, but I felt a stirring in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. "I can't deny that I feel it too," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Something about you feels familiar, like we're meant to cross paths. But I don't know what that means, not yet." James nodded, his face softening. "I'm not asking for anything more than what you're willing to give," he said quietly. "I just wanted you to know, and I wanted to know if you felt the same." I looked down at my hands, unsure of how to respond. I was caught between the fear of opening up and the desire to explore whatever this was between us. But I realized that sometimes you don't need all the answers. Sometimes you just have to take a step forward and see where it leads. "I think I do," I said finally, lifting my gaze to meet his. "I think I feel the same. But I'm scared. I haven't let anyone in like this in a long time." He reached across the table, gently taking my hand in his. "I understand. I'm not going anywhere. We can take this one step at a time, whenever you're ready." There was a pause, the soft hum of the music and the ticking of the clock filling the space between us. My pulse was racing, but there was a sense of calm settling over me, a feeling of safety in his words. And then, without another word, he leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't a rushed kiss or a desperate one. It was slow, tender, an unspoken promise that whatever this was, it was real, and it felt right. When we pulled away, I could see the same mixture of relief and understanding in his eyes. We didn't need to say anything. We both knew that we had crossed a threshold. Something had shifted between us, and there was no going back. "I'm glad you came over today," he said softly, his voice filled with warmth. I smiled, feeling my heart settle in a way it hadn't in a long time. "Me too." We sat together for a while longer, talking quietly and simply enjoying each other's company. The evening passed in a peaceful, almost surreal way, as if time itself had slowed down for us. And as I left his home that night, a part of me knew that this was just the beginning of something neither of us could have predicted, but something worth exploring, no matter where it led. It had been a few days since that evening, and the world outside seemed to be carrying on in its usual way, indifferent to the quiet shift that had occurred between James and me. Life, it seemed, was moving forward, but for us, something had changed. There was a new depth to our conversations, a new quiet understanding that lingered between us like the scent of the evening air. It wasn't just about the physical connection anymore. It was about something deeper, more meaningful. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty that tugged at me. One afternoon, I found myself standing at my window, staring out at the street, watching the leaves dance in the wind. My mind kept returning to James, to that kiss, to the way he'd looked at me when we shared those words about being scared and unsure. I couldn't quite put it into words, but I felt like I was on the edge of something profound, something that could change everything. My phone buzzed, interrupting my thoughts. I glanced down to see a message from James. "Hey, I've been thinking about you. Can we talk?" I felt my chest tighten. I hadn't expected him to reach out like this. It wasn't that I hadn't thought about him, I had. But after the last time we saw each other, things had felt so delicate. I didn't want to rush into anything. Yet, at the same time, there was a part of me that longed for clarity, for answers. I quickly typed out a reply. "Of course. I've been thinking about you too. When would be a good time?" His response came quickly. "How about dinner tonight? Same place, 7 p.m.? I couldn't help the smile that spread across my face. It felt like something familiar, comforting. We had already shared so much between us, yet it felt like we were just scratching the surface. "I'll be there," I typed back, my fingers tapping out the words with a sense of anticipation that I couldn't fully explain. The rest of the afternoon dragged on, each minute feeling longer than the last. I spent time pacing around my apartment, getting ready, but also stewing in my own thoughts. What was this? What were we doing? What was he going to say? I had no answers, but somehow that didn't matter. At 7 p.m., I knocked on James' door. When he opened it, there was something different in his eyes, something more serious, but not in a bad way. It was as if he had come to a decision, and now he was ready to share it with me. "Come in," he said softly, stepping aside to let me in. He smiled, but it was a little more subdued this time, as if he, too, was feeling the weight of what was coming. We sat down at the table, the same one where we had shared our first meal together. There was a quiet tension in the air, but it was comfortable, like the calm before a storm, but one that you knew wouldn't be destructive, just something that would change everything. "I've been thinking," James began, his voice low, almost hesitant, "about us, about what this means." I nodded, unable to find the right words myself. Instead, I waited, letting him speak in his own time. "I know we didn't plan this. I didn't expect to feel this way about you," he continued, his gaze meeting mine with an intensity that made my heart race. "But I do, and I don't want to run from it. I think we've both been through enough in our lives to know that time doesn't wait for anyone. I don't want to wait either. I'm not asking for promises or to rush into something, but I want to explore this, to see where it goes, together." His words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. I could feel the sincerity in his voice, and it was clear that this wasn't just about a fleeting moment or a brief connection. He was speaking from the heart. "I feel the same way," I said quietly, my voice filled with emotion. "I don't know where this is going either, but I want to take this journey with you. Slowly, but together." James smiled, a genuine, relieved smile. "Then we're on the same page," he said softly. We sat in silence for a while, just looking at each other. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. Whatever came next, I knew we would face it together, and that in itself was enough. The dinner that followed was easy, natural. It felt like we had always been here, together in this quiet, familiar space. The conversation flowed easily, laughter filling the spaces between us, the tension slowly melting away. We talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories of the past, dreams of the future, and hopes for what might come next. By the time the evening came to a close, I knew we had crossed a threshold, one that neither of us could have anticipated. The kiss that followed wasn't just a physical gesture. It was a promise. A promise to explore this connection, to be vulnerable, to be open, to embrace the uncertainty but move forward regardless. As I left his house that night, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from having all the answers. It was the peace that comes from knowing that sometimes it's okay not to know. That sometimes the beauty of life lies in the mystery of what could be. And with that thought in mind, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I was ready for whatever came next.